So Arteta came out post-game and completely lambasted the officials. Like, it was one of the more ruthless dissections and one of the more laser-focused, I wouldn't say character assassinations of the officials, but it was ruthless. Like, ruthless. He did not hold back in the slightest and was going for their necks. Said it's a disgrace, it can't stand, all this, etc., etc. Now, there's a couple of avenues you can look down this, right? Firstly, as an Arsenal fan, that's exactly what you want to hear from your coach. You feel like you've been robbed and you feel like the referees have wronged you. You want your coach, you want your manager to sit in the interview and defend your club. Because that cost them 3 points. In Arteta's eyes, that decision cost them 3 points. And in a lot of Arsenal fans' eyes, that would have cost them 3 points as well. So Arteta is in his right, from an Arsenal perspective, to criticise the officials. However, there are two issues that I have with this. Firstly, you need to, as much as players need to be protected, I also think officials do need to be protected, because I think officials need to be protected because, I mean, we're going to be speaking about another issue that happened with officiating in the A-League, right? And we're going to be speaking about that a little bit more in depth because of the circumstance around it. But I think officials need to be protected to a certain extent. Arteta going out and completely attacking and borderline abusing the officials is wrong. From a moral and from a objective perspective, it's wrong. From an Arsenal fan perspective, I'd love it. And from the perspective of, there's already a referees crisis all around the world, right? When it comes to football, we need to be able to allow these referees some level of protection when they with their job, right? And I think what Arteta is doing, it could set a very dangerous precedent. So there's that. Secondly, I don't know, cast your minds back to the Liverpool Tottenham decision. Mikel Arteta was asked about it and he said, officials make mistakes, it is what it is, you have to learn from it, you just have to go with it. You just have to go with the flow. Officials make mistakes, it is what it is, you have to move on. So for him to say that in that interview, and for him to come out in this interview a matter of a month later and lambast the officials to a horrendous extent just because it happened against his team, I think that completely null and voids his argument and his opinion, because it's quite clear that he's only saying this because it happened against his team. Because a worse decision was made against another team, he was asked about it and didn't go anywhere near as hard. If he was true to his word and if he was true to wanting this issue being fixed, he would have gone equally as hard at both of these occasions, but he didn't. And I think that goes to show Arteta can sit here and say whatever he wants in the media. He can sit here and say whatever he wants when it comes to. He can sit here and say whatever he wants when it comes to officiating, about how officials need to be better and reform we need to have with VAR, blah 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 blah. But he's shown that he only cares for his team. His best interests aren't for the game of football, are for Arsenal Football Club. So I think that has worked in a negative for him, because the Premier League are going to sit back and say, okay, you think X, Y, Z about this decision. We had a decision that was even worse a month ago, and you didn't say anything. Or you actually, sorry, in even worse, you did say something, but you were very, very committal and partial and neutral to it. You weren't as aggressive, in a way, for that incident as you were this incident, even though that incident was worse. If Arteta was vehemently against the standard refereeing in England and was vehemently against VAR, he would have come out and been equally as hard on both occasions, but he wasn't. So I think it's a kind of, okay, you don't really care. And I think every manager now that is asked about this decision, that was asked about the decision that happened at White Hart Lane a month ago, they need to sit here and say, okay, were they that hard for that decision as they were for their decision against their team? If they were, then fair play. If they weren't, then it's whatever. Because you can't really sit here and say, okay, how's that fair? If that makes sense. So I think Arteta needs to. I think from an Arsenal perspective, like I said, from an Arsenal perspective, It's great. Good on you. You need to do that, right? But from a football perspective, not good. Not good. For the two reasons that I said. You need to protect referees and you also need to be consistent in your opinion. And if you're not, then your opinion's null and void. So doing this is almost acted in a counterproductive way. Because if he had sat here and said, look, a similar incident happened at White Hart Lane, referees make mistakes, you just have to accept it. I can sit here and rant and rave, but nothing's going to change, you just have to accept it. Then I think a lot of people would be like, okay, fair enough, he's been consistent. But he hasn't been. So I think it's very much a yin and yang type thing, or a Jekyll and Hyde type thing, where on one side it's great, and on the other side it's bad, and they kind of act in a counterproductive way to each other, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's all I want to say on Arteta, because I thought Newcastle